In their last three losses, the Royals have had multiple opportunities to cash in, but they failed to do so. Does it concern me in closing out the season? We'll dive into it in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Now, today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB to win $50 instantly when you play $5. The Royals coughed up one tonight at Kauffman Stadium against a very, very resilient Tigers team. And I think a lot of the frustrations that have been built up over the last week or so came out tonight. And, you know, I evaluate this every once in a while when it comes to my followers, the listeners of this podcast, when there's kind of that breaking point that a certain loss happens a couple times in a row, then that one loss that really makes things boil over, that's when you have to come on this episode and kind of talk everybody off the ledge once again. Here's the reality. There are 11 games to go. The Royals hold a playoff spot by 4 games, and they are holding that 4-game cushion over the team they just lost the game to tonight. So if you get swept tonight or in this series, you will go into your off day on Thursday, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the final off day, unless they have an off day on Monday. I need to double check that. But you'd be going into that off day on Thursday with a 2-game lead. And you also have to look at what Minnesota would be doing, because right now the panic is not so much on the Royals. The panic's on the Twins, because the Tigers are now just a game and a half back out of Minnesota. And this Twins team is free-falling at this point in time. So it should be a chaotic final 2 weeks in the American League Central, where they could be sending, and they should be sending, 3 teams into the American League playoff picture. We're going to get into this Tigers team in this episode. We're going to get into a certain player being in the lineup in this episode. But what I wanted to kick tonight's episode off with is these failed opportunities that the Royals have had in their last 3 losses. And that goes back to Wednesday night when they blew that game against the New York Yankees. There were opportunities to cash in that game. Even in extra innings, when you're gifted a ghost runner to cash in and drive in that run. Their loss to Pittsburgh on Sunday, even though they had taken the first 2 games, and time and again, I say you can't be greedy in baseball. You can't just expect to sweep everybody. You expect at least one of those games, even when you take a series, to go wrong, to not play your best baseball. But on Sunday, they had multiple opportunities to cash in and either tie, take the lead, and win that game. Didn't do so. And tonight, not all of the opportunities were failures. I mean, it wasn't like the Wednesday night game against the Yankees, in which they went 0 for 11 with runners in scoring position. And against the Pirates, it was 0 for a lot again. And tonight, it wasn't 0 for a lot, but late the Royals just had some bad situational hitting. And in one of those scenarios, I'll just flash forward to the 8th inning. You get first and third. Yuli Gurriel leads off with a single. Tommy Pham moves him to third, or at least moves Garrett Hampson to third. And you got the 2 guys that you want in a spot like that. Bobby Witt Jr. had a grand slam earlier, got his 200th hit on his second at bat, or actually it was his third at bat, excuse me. And he misses on a 97-mile-an-hour fastball from Will Vest right down the middle. And then he pops up to right field, and Garrett Hampson doesn't try to gamble in a spot like that. And Jose Aguasil, who had taken over for Vance Wilson, who was ejected in that game, he probably thought the same thing. We're not going to get thrown out at the plate like we did on Sunday with Tommy Pham, with Salvador Perez coming up to the plate. But Bobby Witt Jr. did not have a good at bat there. He nearly lines one down the line. It's just foul. He spits on a pitch, and then he misses on that 97 right down the middle, and then he pops up to right field. Then Salvador Perez comes to the plate, and he misses twice on a fastball right down the middle. Now, the second miss was popped up to center field, but man, it's not like Will Vest was working around Bobby Witt Jr. and Salvador Perez. He was challenging both of them. And either those guys thought they weren't getting pitches to hit, or they were just good pitches. I mean, they had a little bit more zip than 97. So you don't tie up the game in that spot. And let's be clear, the Royals didn't need to be in a spot like that. They were up 4-0 at one point, and they were up 5-1. But that is a resilient Tigers team that is playing for their lives at this point. They can't really afford losing another series. They have to play damn near perfect baseball for the next 2 weeks. And step one was taking game one in Kansas City. Step two will be taking the series in Kansas City, maybe sweeping Kansas City, and then going into Baltimore and Camden Yards and finding a way to win that series as well. This is a Detroit team that has been the best team in baseball since the middle of August. They have the best record since the middle of August. They've got the number one bullpen since the middle of August. So there's a lot of things going well for Detroit at this point in time. So let's not act like this Royals team got bested by the White Sox. They got bested by a team that's playing even better than them at this point in time. Now, it's still an uphill battle for the Tigers. It's a 1.5-game deficit, but there's only 11 games left here. The weird thing about, chasing teams is that one night you can feel like you are this close, and then the next night you lose and the other team you're chasing wins. And, tomorrow the Tigers could be 5 games back of Kansas City and 2.5 back of Minnesota. I mean, it can change in an instant like that. But the Royals, they hurt Minnesota tonight, that's for sure. And they gifted the Tigers a win. They didn't put him away. Seth Lugo didn't pitch well tonight. That was the second worst outing for him this season. It's only the second time he didn't work into the 6th inning or complete 5 innings of work. The other one being that awful start against the Twins at Target Field. But things usually don't go that bad for Seth Lugo. They usually don't go that poorly, right? Seth Lugo can get through 6 innings, can get through 7 innings. And tonight he didn't. But the Royals had their chances late, and the Royals had their chances on Sunday, and they had their chances on Wednesday night against the New York Yankees. It's not something I believe is devastating. I think there's a little bit of pressing going on with a couple of guys, and that's what I want to lead into with the 8th inning. The Royals get a leadoff single from Michael Massey, who's been hitting the ball very well of late. Then they get a 4-pitch walk from Hunter Renfroe. And here comes MJ Melendez. There has been a couple of arguments that I've heard that would have made sense in a spot like this. MJ Melendez has come through in some high-intensity moments, some high-leverage moments before this season. He had the grand slam against the Dodgers, right? He had the go-ahead 3-run home run in Detroit. So you felt like in a moment like that, maybe you roll the dice with MJ Melendez. I don't think you're bunting there with MJ Melendez because I don't think he's got many sack bunts to his name in his career. But if that is the case and you are into just tying the game, you might think about pinch hitting Robbie Grossman there. And Robbie Grossman could maybe get one down. You'd already taken Adam Frazier out of the game. You'd already put Kyle Isbell in there, though Kyle Isbell was starting tonight, so he didn't need to be put in the game for a defensive replacement or anything like that. Dairon Blanco was in to swipe second base or swipe third base and couldn't get that done because MJ Melendez strikes out and then Maikel Garcia rolls into 2. That's another part of this, is I'm not sure you bunt guys over for Maikel Garcia. Maikel Garcia is not hitting the ball well right now. If you are bunting guys over for Bobby Witt Jr., well, you're taking the bat out of his hands because they're certainly not going to pitch to him. They're probably just putting him on immediately. But there's not too much of a reason there, in my opinion at least, to gift the Tigers an out. All right, Michael Massey had the single. Then there was a 4-pitch walk. So when a guy doesn't really have the best command, well, you don't want to just gift him an out. And you are moving runners over for your number 7 or 8 hole hitter. That's not a advantageous spot for me. No, it's more so on MJ Melendez there. You got to find a way to get that runner to third. And if it's not through a bunt, right, if we're going to rule that out, you got to get a ball to right field deep enough to move that runner up. You have to do something, anything in your power to move that runner over. And that's been the big issue to me in these last 3 losses. The Royals are not doing a good enough job in just moving runners over. And if you do need to simplify that, then hey, I'm not going to fight you on the sack bunt. I'm not going to fight you on laying one down to tie the game there. But the Royals, I think, were going for the lead, and they wanted to line it up to get Lucas Ursig in there. But it didn't happen. And that's a Tigers team that has a great bullpen. They were able to work out of that jam, and you tip your cap to them. But too many missed opportunities. They are feeling the effects at times of not having Vinny Pasquantino in that lineup, somebody that could move the runners over, drive the runners in, but he's not coming back anytime soon. So you got to rely on who you have right now. And who you have right now, simply put, has not done a good enough job in the last 3 losses. Way too many missed opportunities. Yeah, you can't have first and second and nobody out and come up empty-handed. Not in a one-run game and not this late into the season. You got to find ways to move guys over and get guys in. And tonight and on Sunday and last Wednesday, the Royals did not do a good enough job in those games, and that's why they lost those games. But there's 11 to go here. They still hold a playoff spot by 4 games. They need to get back up on the horse tomorrow, and hopefully Cole Reagans can give them a better start than what Seth Lugo gave them tonight. We're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, let's talk about this resilient Tigers team that went from an afterthought to a potential playoff threat. We'll dive into them next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor in FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and from YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're into putting in a little bit of money on maybe some football games, you're looking to baseball right now, I'll give you a little bet for the baseball game tomorrow. Cole Reagans has been pitching well of late. I always like to say this, but bet the over on that strikeout total. If you're looking offensively, Bobby Witt Jr. was great tonight. I'd expect he'd be great tomorrow in facing Casey Mize, so I take the over on the total bases there as well. But do it over at FanDuel. I do have to give a little bit of praise to the team that won tonight at Kauffman Stadium. And I had put this out on Twitter, and you can follow me on Twitter or X, whatever you call it, at JohnnyJ_15 for daily Royals content. This is a Tigers team that is taking the playing for your lives approach to a whole nother level. They've been doing that since the beginning of August. And ever since they started catching a little bit of fire, they got healthier. It made it easier to go on stretches like this. And last year, the Tigers were able to do kind of the same thing. They finished in second place. We were soon to forget that from last year's AL Central because last year's AL Central wasn't very good. There was one team that finished over 500, and now there might be 4 teams that finish over 500. And in all likelihood, that will be the case. But I do have to give credit tonight because that game didn't start well for Detroit. You know, Reese Olson's coming off the injured list. He gives up a grand slam to Bobby Witt Jr., and he doesn't work deep into that game at all. And Detroit immediately goes to the bullpen. And A.J. Hinch has been around the block. He has won a World Series, whether you want to count it or not because of the trash can scandal. Look, I know there's some bad feelings towards A.J. Hinch, but the Tigers gave him a shot to manage again because he can take teams to the postseason, and he knows how to manage postseason games. And what we saw tonight is the same thing we saw from Alex Cora when the Red Sox came to town. They managed it like it was a playoff game. And I'm not going to say that Matt Quatrero didn't. I mean, he pulled Seth Lugo early. He went to Sam Long in a spot, which In my opinion, the top 4 arms in that bullpen are Ursig, Bubic, Sam Long, and John Schreiber. He went Long and Schreiber to bridge that gap, and Sam Long didn't do his job long enough. You don't want to burn Bubic there. You don't want to burn Ursig there. You got to save those guys just a little bit longer. So I'm not saying that he let that one go, but the Tigers, just by the standings, are in a different spot than the Royals. The Royals tonight lost that game, and it stinks. It certainly stinks. If the Tigers lost tonight, that very well could have been their season. Not completely, not mathematically, but you lose that game. It's hard to win a series after you fall behind 1-0. And then you got to face Cole Reagans the next night. It's tough to do, right? And the Tigers at this point can't afford to lose any series. They have to win or sweep every series pretty much the rest of the way, or bank on the Twins just continuously losing. But in that same conversation, the Twins keep losing, they have to keep winning. So there is a different approach a little bit. The Tigers are playing like there's no tomorrow. And yes, that sounds like the perfect way to manage every single game. But you also have a easier path with that when you got a lot more bullpen arms you can turn to that are high leverage guys. They have the one of the best bullpens in baseball next to Cleveland, or at least of late, it's been one of the best bullpens in baseball. They got an offense that's getting healthier, and they're rolling right now. They're carrying a lot of momentum. It's a resilient team, and I put this out there. I meant to circle back to this, but it's going to be a very tough 2 games for the Royals here. It was going to be a tough series in general. This is not the same Tigers team they saw at Kauffman Stadium back in May. This is not the same Tigers team they saw a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago in Motown. It's just not. This team's healthier now. They're playing better baseball. The bullpen has gotten back to its strength. It's going to be a really tough 2 games. You still got to see Tarek Skubal on Wednesday. The Tigers are going to have the advantageous matchup there. The Royals will have another advantageous matchup tomorrow night. But it's more so about keeping this Tigers lineup now at bay. I was not giving them enough credit throughout this season. I said they have a great starting rotation. They got a great bullpen. They can't score enough to keep up with the rest of the teams in the playoff push. Tonight, we saw they can. They can get hot. They can put together good at-bats. They are hard to kill. And that's something the Royals have been able to do to a lot of teams, and they've been able to do it to Detroit at times. But this Tigers team is scrappy, and they are playing like a cornered animal. They are fighting their way off the ropes. And the Twins now only have a 1.5 cushion over a Tigers team they didn't need to worry about until really the beginning of September. It's been a fantastic push for them. You got to tip your cap there if you're just a baseball fan in general. But the Royals had this opportunity going into tonight to be the ones to step on their throat, to be the one to say, your season's done. Ours is still gunning for a home playoff series, hosting a wild card game, hosting a ALDS game, and that still should be the goal. But the focus now needs to be turned to, you got to find a way to win 1 or 2. One of these final 2, in my opinion, is the way you have to look at it. Because here's the reality of it. The Tigers, if they sweep you, are only 2 games back of you. Maybe they have a playoff spot by the end of Wednesday night. But if you just take 1, you have a 4-game cushion over this Tigers team. If you walk away on Thursday with only 1 win in that series, you feel okay about a 4-game cushion with 9 games to go. At that point, you just need a series win against the Giants, and it should all be but wrapped up in that series against Washington, where you could clinch a playoff spot, unless you just sweep the Giants and things fall your way and you can clinch a playoff spot at home. But this is a Tigers team that I think a lot of Tigers fans would say is going to be a what-if team when it's all said and done, whether they make it or not. I think they will be able to look back at 2024 and go, what if this team was healthy? And I think the rest of the American League Central is very fortunate that Tigers team was not healthy until mid-August. They were missing some key pieces most of that season. They had a great rotation. They have a great bullpen. They've got threats in that lineup with Parker Meadows, Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter can be a threat. You get down that list. I mean, not all the averages are great, but Zach McKinstry can be a hard out, and he's been a hard out for the Royals in the last couple series. Spencer Torkelson has come around a little bit since coming back from AAA. Matt Vierling can run into a few. It happened off Chris Stratton in Detroit earlier in the year. They've got guys that are very underrated, and they're a what-if team to me. They still can make the postseason, but even if they do make the postseason, I think Tigers fans would be wondering, man, what would this team look like if you had this group back in April and May and June and July and August, if they had the health for the most part that the Royals did in that first half of the season. The Royals didn't deal with many injuries in that first half. Then it all kind of caught up to them in the second half. But this is a resilient team. This is a feisty team. And these next two games are going to be incredibly tough. You have another 4-run cushion. You can't blow another one like that. I mean, there are only 11 games to go for the Royals. But at this point, it's all about just counting down those days. But the easiest way to do that is continuing to stack W's. They'll have to go out tomorrow night with Cole Reagans on the bump and find a way to grab that one, because you're not going to feel too good trying to avoid a sweep against Tarek Skubal on Wednesday. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, I got some thoughts on Adam Frazier getting his 5th start tonight. Why is he still getting starts this late in the year? And if there's any method to the madness. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our final sponsor and our title sponsor in PrizePicks. Now, with PrizePicks, it is the #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, and it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect, and you can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play that $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. There has been a lot of commotion, mainly on social media. I don't know about the day-to-day in the real world, because we like to call it the real world outside of social media. But at least on social media, been a lot of criticism of Matt Quatrero for starting Adam Frazier tonight for a 5th straight game. He started that finale against the Yankees. He started all 3 games in Pittsburgh. He did homer in one of those games. And then he started tonight, though was pulled by the 5th inning, was it? I think it was the 5th inning for Maikel Garcia. It was just a lefty to face Reese Olson, who didn't have a favorable splits against left-handed hitters. But I can see the anger and the frustration with playing a guy who has just not been good this year. Right? Adam Frazier, there's no way to sugarcoat it. Adam Frazier has not been good offensively this year. And I would like to say that the easy choice is just giving those at-bats to Maikel Garcia. If you're thinking about who to start at third base, if you don't want to go with Paul DeJong, just let Maikel Garcia take those at-bats from Adam Frazier. I will say this, though. Paul DeJong is 9 for his last 50 with 22 strikeouts. Paul DeJong is in a mega slump right now. Maikel Garcia has been in a slump for a long, long time. Not as bad as Paul DeJong's and not as bad as Adam Frazier's, but he's been in a slump. And tonight he wasn't very good either. And maybe it's just that sophomore slump for Maikel Garcia adapting to Major League pitching. He's playing for a full season for the first time this year. He started the year well, hasn't really been good since. And Adam Frazier being in the lineup is not to say that the Royals don't have confidence in Maikel Garcia or Paul DeJong getting out of that slump, but they felt like that was the favorable matchup. And I think they did look at it this way. Reese Olson was going to be on a pitch count to some sort tonight. And if the Royals got to him early, he wasn't going to work deep into the game, which happened. Bobby Witt Jr. had the grand slam. Reese Olson did not go much deeper into that game. And they pulled Adam Frazier after one at bat. I believe he walked in the only at bat that he had. I can calm everybody's mind, I guess, or at least their attitude toward this, by giving you this simple point that Adam Frazier is not going to be starting in a playoff game. He will maybe be a defensive replacement in one of those games. He might get a pinch hit opportunity in one of those games, but he is not going to be starting. I believe on Mailbag Friday, I had the chance to answer a question on my projected lineup. Adam Frazier's not in it. I think that if you had a pitcher who wasn't a strikeout pitcher, I think Paul DeJong starts at third base and Michael Massey starts at second. If it is a guy that's a big strikeout pitcher, I think Maikel Garcia will be starting over Paul DeJong, because I just think with Paul DeJong being a big strikeout guy, you don't want to put him up against somebody who is a big strikeout pitcher. And I look at, if it's the Baltimore Orioles, it'd be tough to see Paul DeJong in the lineup against Corbin Burns, or it'd be tough to see him in the lineup against Zach Eflin, to be honest with you, which would be the game 1 and game 2 starter for the Baltimore Orioles. If it was the Yankees, you're getting Luis Gil, or you're getting Nestor Cortez or Carlos Rodon. Again, there will become a point in time to really iron that out. But to me, I think Maikel Garcia is the starting third baseman in a playoff game. Bobby Witt Jr. is at short. Massey's at second. I think Yuli Gurriel will be the first baseman in a playoff game. Salvi will be behind the plate. I think you could DH somebody like a Freddie Fermin. I think Renfroe will be in right, Isbell will be in center, and Tommy Pham will be in left. I think that would be the course of action for the Royals. Adam Frazier's not going to be starting in a playoff game. Call me crazy if you want to. Maybe you don't trust Matt Quatrero to not start him. I don't see it. I think it's a little bit of trying to play matchups, and I think it's to give a little extra rest to some of the guys that have been slumping. This would be a much different conversation if Paul DeJong was still in his hot stretch, or Maikel Garcia had found the rhythm, but that's not the case right now. And no, Adam Frazier is not doing better than those guys, but I don't think Paul DeJong is an everyday player. I don't think Maikel Garcia is an everyday player at this point, and I don't think that Adam Frazier is. So you play the matchups, and Matt Quatrero wanted to play the matchups for the first 4 innings of tonight's game, and Adam Frazier walked in his at-bat that he was up there. I am not going to be in support of him starting tomorrow. I would much rather see a guy like Paul DeJong in the lineup to see if he can get out of that slump. But I'm just not overly concerned at this point that Adam Frazier has now all of a sudden become a mainstay in the lineup. Yes, he has started 5 games in a row, and who knows, maybe he does start tomorrow, but I don't see that being a consistent thing come postseason time. And yes, I still am confident this Royals team is headed to the postseason despite their collapse tonight. But, those things can happen, right? Those things can happen. And at this point, I think there are bigger issues to address than Adam Frazier being in the lineup. If Adam Frazier gets 1 at bat in the game, I'm not going to lose my mind over it. Adam Frazier is also not going to stay in the lineup if there's a critical moment upcoming in the 6th inning or the 7th inning. Maybe if it was a matchup situation, you let Adam Frazier hit against the righty. But I would say more often than not, when he comes up in a big spot, bases loaded, 2nd and 3rd, he's not going to be up there. It'll be somebody else pinch hitting for him. I could be eating my words here. I could be absolutely wrong. And Adam Frazier starting the rest of the way, I just get no feel that he is going to be starting. It's been a little bit of a surprise that he started 5 straight games, considering he didn't play for like a week prior to that start that he had against the Yankees in the finale. But it's the way that this lineup is being constructed right now. It's a lot of mixing and matching and playing the matchups. And tomorrow, I'm curious to see how Matt Quatrero will play the matchups in a start against Casey Mize. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we'll either be bringing you a morning episode talking a little bit more about this lineup and looking ahead to the next matchup against the San Francisco Giants, or we'll be bringing you a recap after tomorrow night's game between Cole Ragans and Casey Mize. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.